So, as Kemi Badenoch stumbles past the 100-day mark of her leadership, the Conservative Party finds itself trapped in a purgatorial state of electoral oblivion, hand-wringing and existential angst, and this milestone pales in comparison to the 50 years since Thatcher became leader of the Conservatives in 1975. 50 years to the day. And what are we thinking of? We're thinking of Kemi Badenoch. This is madness. The contrast between these two women is stark, like comparing a seasoned war general to a reluctant intern whose chief accomplishment is organising the staple drawer, and that badly. While Thatcher seized the reins of power in the party in a crisis and sculpted it into an ideological force because no one else was prepared to do it, because Sir Keith Joseph didn't want to stand, she said she went in. No stalking horse, she went in, she did it. Badenoch's tenure thus far has been a masterclass in inertia, dithering, and the steady erosion of whatever credibility the Tories have left. Let's begin with Thatcher's first 100 days. The greengrocer's daughter from Grantham was not at the time the formidable hairsprayed spectre of neoliberalism that we now recall, but she was decisive, she was disciplined, and she possessed that iron will that over the years transformed the Conservative Party and the country. And even in those early days, she understood that winning required ruthlessness, clarity, listening to others, and above all, the ability to command authority. And Badenoch, on the other hand, has spent her first 100 days seemingly learning how to hold a microphone at PMQs, while Farage devours her base with the ferocity of a lion discovering a particularly succulent gazelle. And as one weary Conservative MP has put it, Badenoch has the mandate to renew our party from top to bottom, yet she has managed only to demonstrate that the party's top is confused, the bottom is disappearing, and the middle is too busy drafting resignation letters to notice. Take PMQs. While Thatcher understood that every moment at the dispatch box was an opportunity to set the narrative and impose her authority over her own party and over the party in government, Badenoch's appearances have been about as impactful as a damp firework. Why? Because she tries to channel Thatcher, and she fails every single time. She has failed to land significant blows on Starmer, who, despite his own wooden delivery, is at least competent in the art of not losing. At least he can construct an argument. Conservative MPs now whisper openly about her inability to lead, and with Reform UK breathing down the Tories' neck, their fear has turned into outright panic. But Badenoch has a media strategy, we're told. This strategy, rather than engaging with major networks where she might possibly persuade sceptical voters, involves courting the ever-reliable support of triggernometry podcasts and hoping the electorate is won over by long-form chats in obscure corners of YouTube. Her refusal to engage with traditional media gatekeepers might have some strategic merit. Had she actually used the alternative platforms to articulate a compelling vision for her party, instead she has managed to transform her public presence into a weekly exercise in evasive waffle. And meanwhile, Reform UK's ascent has continued unchallenged. Nigel Farage, that perennial spectre of Conservative nightmares, has more media presence than Badenoch, despite his party's relative lack of MPs. Five! And people will listen to him. 5, and he gets out with the tractors. While Thatcher crushed the National Front and pulled the right-wing vote into her fold, Badenoch has spent 10 days politely insisting that she won't do a deal with Farage, while simultaneously failing to contain his rise. She has all the strategic foresight of a captain rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, convinced the iceberg will simply move aside if ignored enough. Conservative MPs are now discussing Badenoch's sell-by date, with the same enthusiasm usually reserved for bad milk at the back of the fridge. The idea that she will lead the party into the 2029 election is met with increasingly sardonic laughter in the corridors of Westminster. Even Ruth Davison, never one to mince words, has predicted she'll be gone in 18 months. Meanwhile, her defenders, what remains of them, insist she is super bright and organised. Well, you know, it's a relative concept, isn't it? My cat was. This is a curious defence. One might argue that a well-organised person would have by now organised a coherent opposition strategy rather than watching Reform take over from the Conservatives in key polls. Badenoch's failure is not just one of strategy but of ideology. Thatcher, for all her faults, understood that to win the Conservative Party needed clear direction. Whether you agreed with her or loathed her, there was never any doubt about where she stood. Badenoch, by contrast, has spent her first 100 days arguing with herself. Her attempts to attack reform for its lack of credibility are undercut by the embarrassing reality that, in many ways, reform's appeal stems from the very failures of her own party. Where Thatcher imposed order, Badenoch has inherited chaos. Rather than attempting to oppose any discipline, she has simply let the chaos and let the ill-discipline fester. The local elections in May will be, as one Tory MP put it, a car crash. The Scottish and Welsh elections in 2026 may well determine her fate, though at this rate she may not last that long. If history repeats itself, Kemi Badenoch's leadership will be but a footnote, an unfortunate interlude in the dying party's final years, and Thatcher may have had her detractors, but she led with a purpose, reshaped her party with a purpose, defined an era with a purpose. Badenoch, in contrast, is defining nothing except for herself, a long, slow, painful decline of Conservative credibility. Perhaps she should take today's anniversary, the real anniversary, as an opportunity for reflection, because if she continues on her current path downwards, the next anniversary she marks will be the day she was unceremoniously shown the door.